Hello and welcome to this video. My name's David Thorne and you are watching David's Videos. In this video tutorial, we're going to be talking about how to use MySQL within inside of a Docker container. We're going to use a Docker Compose file that is going to create a MySQL service that's going to use the latest MySQL image from Docker to build a MySQL service within inside of a container that's listening on a external port and that can be configured and used from internally in the container and externally. I'm going to go through this super slow. It shouldn't take anything more than 15 minutes. By the end of this tutorial, you will know how to create a MySQL service within inside of a Docker Compose. You will know how to start it, to stop it. You will know how to access it from within inside of the container. You will know how to execute the container using Docker, and you will know how to access the MySQL CLI from externally. But we're going to get into this very slowly. The prerequisites for this are that you are running a Docker on your machine. I'm using a Mac and I've got a Docker already pre-installed. And that's basically it. That's all that you need. You just need Docker running and somewhere that you can use a code editor or a text editor, something like that. We're going to be doing this all through terminal. Okay, so we're going to use the text editor to create the Docker Compose file, and the rest is going to be done all through the terminal. Don't worry about it. I'm going to explain exactly what I'm doing step by step. So by the end of this, you'll have a good understanding about how you can do it yourself. Okay, before we get started doing anything, I just created a list of things just so you understand what we're actually going to do. Okay, so step one, as I said in the prerequisites, you need to have Docker installed. We're going to create a project folder where our MySQL Docker Compose file and so on is going to be, and all other configuration files, etc., etc. Once we've created that folder, we'll create a docker-compose.yaml or YAML file there. Inside of that, we want to be able to define our networks. Also forgot to put on the list, so we'll put 3.a is the version. We're going to be using a Docker Compose file of version 3 in this, so we have to make sure we define the version. Networks, we're going to define a network because there's going to be other containers that want to be able to communicate with our MySQL. For that reason, we'll add a network so Docker can add all of our containers onto the same network and they can communicate with each other using the container names. Ports, it's important that obviously we predefine which ports MySQL is listening to so we can access it from externally and also from within inside of the container and so on. The volumes, in the beginning, what we're going to be using, well, probably for the whole of the video, we're going to be using a MySQL folder, which is going to be created within inside of our project folder, where all of the actual MySQL data is going to be written to. So it means it only has to be created once, and it means that the database and the users and so on, they are carried over to it every single time we start and stop it because the folders already exists. 7 is configuration. We want to have a my.cnf file. With 8 is environment variables to tell it what the MySQL root password is, what your MySQL user name is, and the password for that one user name, and also the database that it should create, MySQL database. Final thing is to build it and run it to make sure it continues and stays as a MySQL server, and then finally just testing that we can access the container using all different variations. With that said, let's get started, shall we? Okay, so I'm on the terminal, and what we need to do is create our project folder first of all. So I'm in my trash projects folder, and let's just say make project and say David's MySQL here, and we need to go into that, and I'm going to open up Visual Code and then create a Docker Compose YML. You can use a YAML, or it doesn't matter, just use one of them rather than using two. As I said, with inside of the listing, we need to use a specific Docker version or Docker Compose version. This is all within inside the documentation on the Docker website. So if you want to know the differences, then get yourself over to the Docker website to have a look. Next thing we want to do is create a network. Why do we do this? We want to know that our different containers inside of this Docker Compose file, our services, can communicate with each other without having to use any IP addresses and so on. So this is why we do it. So we're going to write networks, and in this situation, we're going to call it David's network. Okay, and that's all we need to do. There are sub configurations of this, but we're not going to get involved in them here. Okay, the next one is then a services key, and our first service that we're going to write is MySQL service, and we're going to call it MySQL as well. Now, because there's already a pre-configured MySQL container with inside of Docker, we're going to just say that the image that should be used is then the latest version of the MySQL container. So just say image is then MySQL, and we'll say give us the latest version all the time. Whether or not this is a good or bad thing, it doesn't matter. For right now, we just want to have the latest version. So we can reference the container easily. We're going to name it David's MySQL. Okay, the next thing that we want to be able to do is access it through the ports. So we need to use the ports key, and then we're going to say 33607 just because, and the port that is going to be listened to with inside of the container, or the MySQL instance is going to be listening to on 3306. The container is going to be listening on 33607, and that is going to be binded to 3306. It means that we can access this one MySQL instance with inside of this MySQL container using port 33607. And the Docker will do the rest inside of it to make sure the addresses are bound to each other. Okay, the next thing is the volumes key. Now, the volumes key is going to do one of a couple of things. It's one going to create the folder where all of the MySQL information is going to be. So let's start off with this. And this is then going to be a MySQL folder that's going to be created by Docker for us. And this is going to be bound to the var lib MySQL folder on the one container, and that is predominantly where Docker, where MySQL lives anyway on a Linux server. Next thing we want to do is we want to say that inside of this one folder, there's a folder called conf, which we're going to create, and inside of that is a file called my.cnf. This is going to be bound to and essentially just replace the my.conf with inside of that one container. Okay, so before we forget, let's create this conf directory, and inside of it, let's create our myCNF file. And we need to update this CNF file with the relevant text that needs to go in there. I don't bother learning it, so I just got it to copy and paste it. There it is. And as you can see, the data directory is where the MySQL is actually located. Now, in order to be able to access the MySQL daemon on this one MySQL container, we need to be able to tell it for which ports it needs to bind itself to with inside of here. So we're going to say bind address is equal to 000. This means that we can access it from outside, from externally. Okay, so now we've done that, we want to be able to attach it to our networks first of all, and we're going to say that it's on David's network. Okay, just before we continue, I just want to remind you that this video is sponsored by me, and it would be nice if you could like, subscribe, dislike, comment below, write some feedback, do whatever. If you have any questions, then do it. You know, I enjoy doing these videos, and I hope you're getting something out of it. So anyway, I don't want to hold you up any further. Let's get back to the video, shall we? All right, we've done volumes, we've done configuration, we've done ports, we've done networks, and so on. The next thing to do is the environment variables. Now, if it doesn't have the correct environment variables, it basically cannot start up properly. It'll start, but it'll start with a warning. So what we first want to do is be able to define the MySQL root password, and we're just going to say password, obviously, and then we want to define the MySQL user that should be used on this one container. And this situation, we're going to call it David, and we're going to give David another super strong password of passwords. And also we're going to tell it which database David should use on in the MySQL instance. And so we're going to say the database, and should be David's database as well, that will be created, and David will have all permissions to be able to access David's database, and so on. Right, this is pretty much it. Let's just go through and check. We've got a version. We've created our networks called David's network. Our services, we've got our service called MySQL, and that's running off the MySQL image and using the latest version. The container name is David-MySQL, so we can access the container outside once it's up and running using David-MySQL. We've told it which ports it should listen on internally and externally, so we can access it. The volumes, we've given it a folder where it should have all of its data directory. And also we've provided it with its conf file that it needs. Also, we've now told it which network it should be attached to, and then we've given it all of its environment variables to use. This is basically it. So now that we've done this, we can test it out and see whether it's working or not. So opening the terminal, we can just run docker-compose up to see whether everything's perfectly fine. And we'll just let it run. Okay, so MySQL is up and running. Key points to note here is that creating a database, creating user David, giving user David access to schema database, and so on. And we see that we haven't got any errors in here whatsoever. We also see that our MySQL folder got created, so we know that it's working from this side. So that is our builder and run. Now, it's obviously it stopped us from this. If we close this terminal, it's going to die once again. All right. So what we can do is we exit out of this, and we want to be able to keep this running in the background. And what we can do is we can run our Docker Compose up again using the -d. This time it will do everything, but it will keep this one MySQL container up and running. So let's run it again. And you see it was a little bit quicker this time because it's done all of the hard work of creating the use of the databases and so on. Right now, if we run docker container and then ls, we see that our container David-MySQL is there. And if we also run docker psa, we see that we've got loads of different things running, but my David-MySQL is up and running and listening to the different ports. Okay. The final thing is to be able to actually go inside of the one container to access the MySQL very imperatively. So we can do this by saying docker execute, and then it means it's interactively, and we want to say David MySQL, because that's what the container name was, and we're going to say open up bash. So now we're inside of our container, and if we go to if we just cat out the conf file, you see the conf file that I wrote here already. Okay, and also we know that the directories are created. So, but we want to be able to access the MySQL. So if we say MySQL u, and we'll say root first of all and -p, and type in our strong password, you see we access as root. And if we say show databases, we see all of the databases that are there. if we say select user host from MySQL user, we see that we've got a user of David as well. So let's exit out of this, and now we can try accessing it as David. So we can run it again, and user this time is David, and password enter David, and we can see show databases, and then we've got the correct privileges just for this one user. Okay, now we exit out of the one container once again, and this time we want to access MySQL from my MacBook rather than from within inside of the container. So it's important to note this 33607. So we say MySQL user, and it's going to be David. The host is going to be the 000. The port is important, 33607, and -p. And if we say password, and once again we say show databases, and we've got the same thing. So we can exit out of this, and now we know that we can access the database. Okay, to shut the server down, the MySQL server down, all you've got to do is say docker-compose down. And this will remove the container, bring down all of the services, and it's done. And now if we try and access it once again, cannot connect to the MySQL server, and so on. And even if we try and access this error, no such container, and if we say container ls, we see that our container is not there anymore. And also if we run then psa, we can see that the David's container is not there anymore. So it just goes to show you that it was created and it was gone. And to run it again, all you have to do is run docker-compose up d, and by the magic of Docker, we have it once again. All right, that's this stage of the video finished. Okay, so there we go. So by the end of this video, you should have now learned how to create a MySQL service using Docker-compose, access it within inside the container, externally through the container, start it, stop it, and see how you can work out whether it's up or running, not running, and whether the container's there. I hope you've enjoyed this one video. I've enjoyed doing it as well. It was a little bit longer than what I expected to do, but I'm hoping that there was stages in it that you can skip through and or go back to if there were things that you did or didn't know and stuff like that. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below if you have any questions or feedback, and don't forget to tap that bell icon to get notified of any other new videos that I release in the future. Stay safe. I wish you a fantastic evening, afternoon, day, whichever time you're watching this. Okay, see you next time. Bye.